What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to 8 Cubes. I'm Cam Best, he's Lamby Series, and we're going to start out today with a discussion of Rocket and Groot, which is releasing on Tuesday. That is right, Rocket and Groot. It is one card, two characters. The team-up mechanic from Marvel Rivals has made it to Marvel Snap. I don't know if this is a one-off or if they're going to be looking at doing things like this in the future, but it does open up some interesting options for them in terms of card making. However, this card itself is plenty interesting. It is a 3/3 with an ability that says you can move this one time, and if your opponent plays a card on the lane that this card is on, it will steal one power from that card. When I look at this card, what I see is a very good 3-drop that gets better against bounce stuff and helps to close the gap between mid-range stuff and stuff that tries to go over the top of it. I don't think it'll close the gap well enough on move bounce, but I do think that a lot of other bounce stuff is meaningfully hurt by this card existing.
Yeah, I just wanna firstly say that this card, the more I look at it, I think it's one of those cards that you really just want to slam on curve, right? Because the earlier you play this card, the better potential it has to like just grow. Because the more cards your opponent play in this location, it just gets bigger. Also, the ability to move once is kind of super insane, right? Like if your opponent just plays multiple cards in one location, you know they are not gonna play there. Like maybe on turn 5, because that's a clog. They'll clog, so you just shift it to another location where you know they will play cards, you know. So you kind of, it's actually quite easy to me, like just in theory, to determine where your opponent's gonna play stuff, because like your opponent wouldn't want to self clock right before the final turn, so you know they're not gonna play there, so you can shift it. I think the power level of this card in general, it feels very. I'm not too sure what's the minimum it should grow to for it to be decent, right? Like 3/6, 3/7 maybe is very doable. 3/10 is like maybe high roll. And of course, versus bounce, you usually get like +4 on the final turn because they will have to spam their whole hand. So
Yeah.
definitely something worth playing against bounce. I wanna think about if it's worth playing just in general, even if there's less bounce. Also, one thing you mentioned, which is really interesting, the move bounce thing is kind of cute, because like this is probably not gonna be enough stats to beat move bounce, because move bounce kind of doesn't add stats, it multiplies, right? It's double,
Yeah.
double, double. So it's a little bit too little for that. But yeah, all in all, this looks like a flexible card, right? You get to move it once, a bit like the name escapes me. What's
Nocturne.
the card? Yes, oh my god, Nocturne. Yes, you also get to move that once, but it's not really adding stats. So I guess this is maybe sometimes better Nocturne in general, right? Because it gets to move and it should be bigger than Nocturne in most scenarios. So I like the card. Probably can find this card to be able to be in some homes or for like mid-range decks and stuff like that.
I think it's really interesting because this is a card that is almost explicitly not as good against move bounce as it is against normal
Hmm.
bounce. And it's a card that is almost explicitly not very good at all against Doom 2099, which is
Yeah.
purely just creating cards out of nothing. Doom 2099 is doing that. Doctor Doom himself is doing that. Like, there's a real interesting profile that this card has where I think if normal bounce were the dominant form of bounce, this could be like a real metagame shifter. As is, I think it's just going to be a very good card because I don't think it'll do enough in the move bounce matchup specifically, which will leave you as a mid range deck still at the mercy of them, basically. Next up is Marvel Snap's biggest whiff of recent memory. I think this is a
Yep.
bigger whiff than any card they've released in a very long time. This is, of course, Bruce Banner, who released as a 2/1, has like a 45% win rate on Untapped, which is crazy because Untapped users self report they're usually going to be biased upwards. And it's hard for me to know how much of this is Bruce's fault versus how much of this is he only goes in high Evo, and high Evo is borderline unplayably bad at this point. How would you approach talking about Bruce Banner? Is it a him problem or is it an Evo problem? Is it both? In what ways could he be fixed? What are your thoughts?
Well, you I think you mentioned one thing which actually makes the most sense. I think it's like mostly correct, which is Bruce Banner kind of only really fits in one deck, right? Which is High Evo. And High Evo with or without I mean, without Bruce Banner, he was never played. With Bruce Banner, people will try the deck and then realize the deck is still not good, right? So I think it's the card is very restricted to being useful in one deck only. And even in that one deck, there's that element of natural failure with the card where it doesn't actually transform, you know. Then why play this subpar deck when the failure rate of the new card is so high anyway? So Yeah, like you said, it's the biggest whiff ever. I don't think people are really complaining about it because I think they saw the card and they thought that it was going to be a whiff anyway, so people didn't really buy it. I don't see a lot of people buying the card anyway, but for those that bought it to try it, all I've been hearing is that like I wasted 6,000 or
Yeah.
or like I shouldn't really have opened for this card. Nothing much to say here. I mean, unless they release another incentive, or if they, be really interesting. They release a card in the future that increases the percentage for things to happen. That'll be a really nice like mechanic, right? Like all effects that have a random chance have like a 25% chance to happen more often. I mean, obviously that's a very specific thing, but unless that happens, I think a Bruce Banner related deck will not see dominant play as of now.
I think the interesting thing to me is what does this mean for potential buffs? Because when you look at the other things that are misses on this level, it's US Agent and Hydra Bob, both of which got buffed into relevance, right? And I think the reason I call Bruce Banner the biggest miss is because I think you could give it a buff commensurate with what US Agent and Hydra Bob got, and it would still be bad because of how much weight it has to carry being in the high Evo archetype. The things that like let's say it got a 20% power boost the way that Hydra Bob did. Okay, so now it transforms into like a 16 power guy. Would that change it? I don't think so. Let's say it got a boost to the impact or the effect that it had the way that US Agent did. Let's say it transformed 33% of the time now. Would that fix it? I still don't think so. Because ultimately what this card is being asked to do is to carry the weight of an entire bad archetype. It is the reason you want to play High Evolutionary. It is not a good enough reason to want to play High Evolutionary, and I think it would be a mistake actually to ask one card to carry the weight of High Evolutionary when the actual solution to making High Evolutionary good again is to buff High Evolutionary. Like that, this is a card that is being asked to do too much. High Evo is conservatively, 40 to 50% of a High Evo deck. That's the card that has to be better. One Bruce Banner cannot carry that weight. And even if they made this card better, maybe they made it a 1-1, maybe they made it a 2-4, maybe they did whatever aggressive buff you'd want them to do in order to make this card better, it would not be enough to carry the weight of how bad High Evo is. And ultimately, that is where this card falls short compared to Hydra Bob and, of course, US Agent.
Funnily enough, I just want to add on to what you mentioned, which is you said make it a 1-1. I don't think it's gonna make the high evo deck like dominant because
Right.
you made it a 1-1, but I kind of want it to be a 1-1 simply because of one very simple interaction, which is you can now play Misty Knight on like turn 1, and then you can play this as a 1-1 on turn 2, and then you start the float, right? So I think
Yes.
that's, and then you get the buff with the Misty Knight as well, which is a thing. So I think it's gonna make it a bit better in the right direction, but it's not gonna make the deck like powerful. But I think that's a good start.
It would be a good start, but ultimately, when you look at what happened with the other previous failures of this level, they were buffed from not very good to extremely, 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 extremely good. Hydra Bob, US Agent, two of the best cards in the game right now. I don't think Bruce Banner can ever be that. And so I almost wonder if it necessitates like a more aggressive tack. I also know that people are going to hate it if he does get buffed. They're going to be like, oh, well, I can't even get it. And it's a negative value proposition for second dinner because, okay, what do we gain out of buffing this card right now? We gain nothing. Everyone actually gets mad. We lose sentiment. People get upset because more people didn't buy this card, and it feels like they're getting punished for making a correct decision not to buy this card. And then also, we might have made this card very good and desirable, and now we can't sell it because it's not in caches.
Agree.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the discussion we had last week involving which 4-drop build around to, well, build around. Doom 2099, Anti-Venom, and Wiccan. I feel like Wiccan has fallen very far behind in this conversation. I feel like we have finally hit a point in a metagame that Wiccan is unable to truly keep up in. It's not always bad or incredibly bad or guaranteed to be bad or like anything that you can't succeed with. It's just, I think he has fallen to a very distinct third in the conversation about which 2-drops I'd like to build around right now. And I think that's tough, or which 4-drops, I should say, I'd like to build around right now. And that's tough. It's not like he's bad, but Wiccan has been a sort of staple deck for a lot of people, just an easy, straightforward deck to build and play. And I wonder how many people there are that are just going to not be able to succeed to the same level in a metagame that doesn't favor Wiccan because of the card acquisition system, because there is now not necessarily a better version, but a more relevant to the metagame 4-drop build around in the form of both Anti-Venom and Doom 2099. And I think that that is something that gives me pause, right? Like what would you do, I guess is the question, in order to make Wiccan more relevant to this metagame?
Honestly, firstly, I agree that Wiccan is probably like the third best or even maybe fourth best option right now. But I think firstly, I don't agree that we should like try to buff Wiccan because I think the Wiccan card itself is fine. Like 4 mana, 4/7. If you spend all your energy, get 2 mana after you play the card. I think it's perfectly fine. What I find the problem with Wiccan is right now is that because I like Wiccan as a card, I like the build around Wiccan as well. But so what you really want to do with Wiccan is firstly you cannot play too many tag cards, right? We talk about this a lot already because you need to curve perfectly, right? So once you curve perfectly, you get to play the Wiccan. There lies the problem for me as well, which is I got this extra mana, but there's not really many like 6+2, 6+1s, 5+2 combinations that actually win the game, because we mentioned that Wiccan is straight up it's just a points deck that lets you have like a bit of spare mana to play like big 6s and 5s along with some smaller cards. I think my issue lies with the fact that like what is the pairing that's actually good? Like Aliyah plus what? Is that even good? Or like 5+3? What is good enough to do that? And like the thing is, yes, obviously spare mana to play two like a mid-range card and a big card is fine on the final turn. But to do that, you have to sacrifice playing tech, you have to play the damn Quicksilver, you have to play like some suboptimal things to reach the state of extra mana. And the thing is, what combinations are actually good enough to have that not so good early game, Like to be forced to play Quicksilver, is it good enough so that like to be forced to play Quicksilver, then your final turn you have 8 mana, but like 6+2, what's the 6+2 that wins the game? I don't think that's a lot right now.
Yeah, and the other issue is because you need a 6+2 that wins the game, you're sort of some of those games priced into playing that 2 to get to your Wiccan to enable you to do
Yes.
6+2.
And
So
you don't
it's
have the
like,
2 at the end, right?
right, so like you're running Shadow King or US Agent, but it's like, okay, I have to play this on 2. That sucks. And so
Yep.
now these cards that you need to do one thing are being forced to do another thing. It's a hard day, a hard moment for Wiccan, is what I would say. I have a couple of nerf wishes that I wanted to run by you, and they range from the very important to the not very important. To me, the most nerfable deck in Marvel Snap right now is Move Bounce. I am not sure exactly how I would want to do this, but I would like to make it a little bit harder to be a Move Bounce deck versus being a non-Move Bounce deck, right? I think normal bounce being good is fine. That's fine. It's the numbers Move Bounce gets to with the lack of interaction that make it problematic. So I've got a couple of pitches. I'm going to run a couple of them by you. I'm going to present them to you as a package, okay, of escalating severity. So level 1, not severe at all. Take a point of power off Madam Web. It probably does nothing, but take a point of power off her, because if you can do it and it does nothing, you might as well do it. Level number 2 is send Dagger back to 2/2+2. Chop some of the ceiling off, make it so that if you want to really scale upwards, she's not going to be as hard of a scaler as previous. Level number 3, Vulture back to +5. And level number 4, send Ghost Spider back to 2 cost.
Yo.
Those are the 4 pitches that I have in order of severity.
Okay.
Tell me what you think about that grouping of like in order. Where would you draw the line? Where would you be like, all right, you've gone too far?
Okay, so this is cool. I like all the suggestions and I have my opinions. Firstly, I think the Ghost Spider, the 2 mana one, will hurt too much.
That's why it was level 4. Like that's
Yeah, because the move bounce deck is literally like a super clockwork machine whereby every single energy is needed to be spent in a specific way, and there's like not much room for error because like every turn you need to spend X amount of energy to do like the bounce thing, to do like the growing the thing and then bouncing the thing. Like making the Ghost Spider cost 2, I think easily eliminates random number, by the way, easily eliminates 10 game winning scenarios from the deck because you can't fit that into the curve anymore.
Yeah.
So I think the deck like it doesn't die, but it drops down an entire tier if Ghost Spider is like 2 cost. So I don't want that to happen. I guess I'll lump the whole Vulture and Dagger thing in like one like discussion. I think either one could be fine. I don't think you do both. I think you choose one. I like I can't actually pinpoint which is like the more potent one. Probably Voucher. Probably Voucher is the more potent card because it doesn't really rely on your opponent having stuff there, right? Voucher just moving is already going to be big enough. So maybe we drop the power on the Voucher. Drop the effect of the Voucher to be a bit less powerful. I think that could be a fine change. And then I guess going back to the Madam Web one, it's not exactly pointless, because Madam Web now it's like what? It's 1 point, okay? It's
Yeah,
not significant. But
we
this
would
is the
make her
same.
pointless. Get it?
Yes, this is the same conversation I thought about with like old Professor X and it being a 5-0, which is my argument was that it's impossible for that one card to ever win a lane by itself. I mean, the situation never really pops up that often anyway, whereby your Madam Web wins a location just because it has one power, but it the fact that it's gonna become 2-0 means it can never win a location by itself. So that's something that could be done, honestly. And I think the impact is low, but it eliminates like maybe the 1 out of 50 scenario that a Madam Web just wins because of one power.
So where would you draw the line? Would you draw it like after Dagger? You'd be like, do those two, but don't do the other two?
Yeah, definitely not the Ghost Spider. I think the Madam Web change, whether it happens or not, doesn't matter. But I guess Voucher or Dagger getting nerfed would be fine. Not both though. I think both would be a bit too much.
Yeah. My instinct is I would draw the line at 3. I would do the Madam Web, the
Okay.
Dagger, and the Vulture change. Because what I want to do is allow them to do their dumb scaling stuff, but just chop the top off of it a little bit.
Yep.
Like, I want to drag them down into reality a little bit more. And you even get your super nut draws are still the same. You get your Human Torch, go absolutely nuts, Frigga, all that stuff. That'll still stay. It's just you're gonna need to actually get those in specific, and the rest of the time you're gonna have to play a real game of Marvel Snap. And
Yeah.
that's why I would do those first 3 changes, I think, pretty clearly to me.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing, which is I think this topic is actually really relevant right now because it's not really just the top 100 or top 50 people anymore. I feel like this deck has been trickling down a little bit. I mean, like the top thousands, and I actually play against this deck quite a bit as well. So like it's trickling down to the mass population, and the even less hardcore players are trying out this deck and picking it up as well. So like the amount of people that know what's going on with move bounce is like appreciating, and so I think like it's good to talk about this right now as well.
Moving on to some buff wishes. I think that it's okay right now to bring back old Angela. Red Guardian is as strong as it's ever been. The Kitty Pride decks are fairly okay to good. I think that I would like them to be a bigger part of the metagame. I think that I would like non-bounce move stuff to be able to approach the point output of bounce move stuff. And I think that giving an uncapped Angela back would be a good way to do this. What do you think about that?
Angela is so interesting, right? Like I think it's one of the most like OG cards that has gone through the most like nerfs and buffs. Like they took a bit off, then they gave it a bit back. They took a bit off, then they gave it a bit back. Angela probably has gone through one of the most of those already. But then that being said, I do agree that now we can definitely get back old Angela, and I don't think it will. It will definitely. I don't think it will spiral the meta out of control, right? Like because like some of the like the force decks that we talk about, like the Doom 2099 stuff, they still won't run Angela even if you give it back its old power, and it kind of can't run Angela as well. So I think giving Angela back to some of the more like Kitty Pride style decks would be a good boost to that archetype. And I think people just generally like Angela as a card as well. Also, there's so much counterplay to Angela, right? It's just a sitting duck for sometimes Shang-Chi, always Shadow King, always Red Guardian. So it's a sitting duck for every tech card known to man. So I feel like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Bring it back.
Number 2 that I really wanted to talk about, I think. Well, I guess I don't think this is something that I would do. This is one I want your input on.
Okay.
What would it take? What stat line would you have to give Loki if you gave him the drawback?
So now it's. So wait, what are we talking about again? Like how much power, how much of the Loki's effect are we giving him back?
I'm
again?
giving him the draw. Remember?
Oh, just the draw.
Just the draw.
Just the draw.
The same effect as now, but he draws a card.
Ooh, 2-1.
2-1.
2-1.
See, I was thinking 3-2. I was thinking I wouldn't want to let it be a 2 drop.
Because you draw too much of the good stuff.
Because I don't want Arishem to be able to play it on turn 2 and then start doing a bunch of crap when it goes to 4 energy.
That's relevant.
I want it to be awkward in
relevant.
Arishem specifically. So I wanted it to be like 3-2, 3-3. Like that was the other thing I was thinking of is like, I don't think Loki would be all that amazing at 3-3. We know
Mm.
it was super problematic at 3-5, but like if you give it the drawback, you get a card that people really enjoy playing back into the metagame. You just sold a bundle with it. I guess that's why they won't do it, because they just sold the bundle with it. If the bundle was upcoming, maybe they would do it. But
Yeah, true,
this
true, true. Why?
this like, it feels like I miss having Loki around a little bit. We've been in a lot of very
Same.
stagnant meta games that are mid-rangey, but we're currently in one that has a bunch of decks that Loki would absolutely suck to play into. A bunch of just awful garbage.
Yeah.
So 3-3, could I sell you on that?
What about 4-5?
4-5
Four
with a
five with the
draw? I
draw.
mean, doesn't that just make it, again, it's like the RSM problem. I want to make you feel bad for RSMing with this card. I want you to
Okay,
be
okay,
like,
okay.
yeah, I'm floating a mana to get this. Like, I don't want to make it easy for RSM. So I don't want it to be a 2
Mm.
or a 4. I want it to be a 3. I want them to be like, God, fine, I'll play the Loki, you know?
Yeah, I get what you mean, right? And then flow this energy
Yes.
because I played it on turn
I want
3.
them to feel
Yeah,
bad.
I guess 3-3 is fine. Yeah, 3-3-2 seems a bit weak. I mean, obviously you don't want it to be too powerful as well, but yeah, I think 3-3 is a fine sweet spot. Like playing a 3-3 now never feels good, right? So this 3-3 actually doesn't impact the board immediately. It's a 3-3 draw a card, 3-3 draw a card, and maybe do something. So yeah, I think that makes sense.
Speaking of potentially freaky RSM cards, I want to talk a little bit about Iron Patriot, season pass card for January. This is a card that scares me a lot. There's a conversation we're going to have later about how hard it is to make a card that is actually broken. This is as close as I think they've come since Agent Venom. It is a 2-3 with the ability to add a 4, 5, or 6 cost card to your hand. And then if you're winning the location that Iron Patriot is at next turn, you will get that card discounted by 4. And that card just seems like an absolute freebie to me. Like, obviously, this is the world's greatest RSM card, right? A 2-3 that
Yeah.
gives you a 4-drop, you're just doing that. Like, you play that card anyway. That's called Valentina. That's without the free potential upside. This is a card that is very threatening in a wide variety of scenarios. Like, it's also the kind of card that, like, it's a 2-3 that's very good. You want it in maybe your Wiccan deck. What I'm kind of wondering, though, is does the presence of something like Move Bounce make a mid-range card like this just fundamentally less useful? Because I think this card is amazing, but I don't know how I'm supposed to beat Move Bounce, even if I get like a free guy, you know? Like, is that enough numbers to beat the world's most giantest Human Torch? Maybe.
Well, not always, but firstly, I want to talk about this card in a vacuum first, like without going into deck building or
Sure.
whatever. Firstly, this card cannot be bad. Like it's impossible that this card is bad. So like, firstly, it's a 2-3, right? And then the upside is so easy to achieve, by the way. So all you really need to do is okay. Even if it happens, it's fine. Like if you play this kind of location that your opponent like already has a card in, well, I guess play a big 3 cost card and you sometimes win the location and get the free card, right? But then the easier way is as well of doing it as well as like on turn 2, maybe just don't play this card into a location that your opponent will play a card in, right? I mean it's 66%. Wait, 33%. Wait, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's basically not that difficult to just guess where your opponent will not play a card. So either way, and on that note, right? Since this is a mid-range card, your entire deck is just like filled with good 3 cost cards, right?
Yeah,
So
like
it's very easy
Juggernaut,
to just
Negasonic. Pretty
it could
gross.
just be for what it's worth. If you play this in the empty location and then you play Hope Summers in the same location, that's 7 power. They're
Yeah,
not beating that if they didn't have a card there prior anyway, and then you get the free card. So
yeah.
like this triggering this is not as hard as people might think. I think that's one thing that would be concerning. I think like general Marvel Snap people, they'll be just like, oh, this card is so difficult to trigger. How do I know I'm gonna win the location? Trust me, it's not that difficult to win the location if you play this on curve. I guess the downside is the later you draw this, the worse it gets, which is a lot of cards, right? Even the whole Rocket and Groot we mentioned earlier is like the later you draw it, it's worse as well. So this card, I guess, it's probably a lot worse if you draw it late. But that's why I say it cannot be bad still simply because it's 2-3. You know, if the stat line was way worse, drawing it late is horrible. But drawing this card late is just not bad. It's just a 2-3. Like it's okay. You know, it's kind of okay. So yeah, I'm curious to see where this one will land. I will definitely want to be splashing this in just random mid-range shells and see where this lands. I don't think this card will like suddenly make your deck beat Move Bounce for what it's worth, but free card is good. Free card is good.
What has your experience been with High Voltage?
Honestly, I played it a lot less than the last time I played High Voltage. But we had this conversation about like soggy fries and onion rings. So basically soggy fries is Deadpool's diner, whereby soggy fries is horrible, but like onion rings, there really isn't bad onion rings. Okay, you
Oh
guys
my
can prove me
god.
wrong.
No,
Whatever.
I
There
can't
really
believe
isn't
you.
bad onion rings, right? So the floor for High Voltage is way higher than Deadpool's diner, which is like even if it's the second time High Voltage is back, right? People just love the mode so much so that like even if it's like not a completely new thing, it's still more beloved than what's that called? Than Deadpool's Diner for sure. Of course, in High Voltage, you get to see the most wackiest decks that you never see on a daily basis just appear, like Gambit, Wombo, combo stuff. The most amount of Mr. Negative you'll ever see in your life. And even down to the most basic Black Panther, Zola, Odin. You see that more than ever in your life as well, outside of Pool 1 and Pool 2. So it's just a mode that lets you see new things that you never see on a regular basis. And that is for sure exciting. To me personally, less exciting than the first time I did it. But of course, that's because it's not the first time I'm doing it. It's the second time. And obviously it's gonna be less exciting now. But still breath of fresh air. Nothing bad to say about the mode. Casual mode, people do fun stuff in it. That's all I gotta say.
I'm thinking about not participating in this one, honestly. Like, I don't
You don't
know.
have to. It's just
Yeah. I think the card's actually pretty good, but that would be the only reason I would do it. And like I don't get a lot out of high voltage modes personally out of any of the alternate game modes. They don't hold my interest
same.
very long because the only reason for me to participate is to acquire the card so I can go do better things on ladder because I have terminal, spike brain. But I would say that I think very, very specifically, I object to the way in which you characterized the onion rings versus fries debate. I need to give people the full context here.
Okay, okay.
I was eating onion rings prior to the podcast, and he was like, "Do you like onion rings or fries more?" And my response was, "It is safer to get onion rings at anywhere you go because fries, there are so many different types. There are so many different things a fry can be. A fat, soggy, potato-filled steak fry is not what I want when I want fries. I want crispy, thin fries. I'm here for the crisp. I'm here for the crunch, right? Onion rings are never not going to have that. They're a much more stable purchase if you don't know what kind of fries a place serves. And that's the analogy. I'm worried no one understood what he was talking about. So I'm just explaining the whole thing here. That's the analogy we're talking about. High voltage, you know what you're going to get. It's not going to be super bad. It's not going to be super good. It's going to be fine. It's going to be a fine, reasonable experience where Deadpool's Diner, like you could get Cassandra Nova, the best card in the game, or you could have the worst event that has ever existed and get King Atri out of it. Like the range is much larger on Diner and much smaller on High Voltage because High Voltage doesn't really ask a lot of you. They put 1,500 credits in there. Like hell yeah, they did great. They did great with High Voltage because it asks nothing from you.
Yeah, I'm glad you did the last part because when I was talking about the fries and onion
I
rings
was
thing, the
worried.
context was the
Yeah.
context was so clean in my head. It's just that like when it came out, I realized that I think it was only clean in my head and no one else's head. But okay, anyway, guys, comment whether you like fries or onion rings
Yeah,
more.
I'm right about this, by the way. Like, bad fries are so much worse than bad onion rings.
I do agree. I do agree.
I've been kicking this one around in my head for a little bit now, and I've come to the conclusion that it's actually just like really hard to make a genuinely broken card in Marvel Snap. The last time they pulled it off was Agent Venom. That card was super messed up. And I think conservatively, you could look at Agent Venom and be like, that was a 220, right? That was just a
Yeah.
220. It was a 220. That's what a card needs to be actually broken. And I see people calling like, Doom 2099, that's like a 417, or Galacta, that's like a 415 or a 412. They're so far off. They're so far off. If Galacta was a 2-drop, then we'd be talking, right? Like, but these cards, it is actually very difficult to make a card. When you think about what the previous broken cards in Marvel Snap were, 220 is kind of what it is, where it's like, holy crap, we have to deal with that. It's almost shocking to me, like how many genuinely broken cards we have just sort of all existing in the same space because of the power of counterplay and the power of everything else. Like, I think, barring Agent Venom, their biggest mistake was Madam Web, and that card's not even good if you're not in the top 100 or something. Like, it's it's really remarkable how hard it is to make a broken card. If you just take like 10 seconds and look at it and be like, did we make a 220? And if the answer is no, you're like, yeah, ship it. Like I saw people calling Gore broken, right? He's fine. I'm not even sure he's good. Like he's a pretty good card. I'm not sure he's like, oh my god. He's just like a pretty big guy. He's a big 6. And we have like 7 of those in the game. And it's like, it seems, unless you are making something truly messed up, that it's kind of hard to break the game right now.
Yeah, I think just want to add a few small things because I agree with what you said most of, for the most part. Like if you in the past, right, like when we used to do these like card reviews and episodes and stuff like that, it was a lot easier to just say this card is broken. But I think as more like cards get released in the game right now, everything seems to have a counterplay. Everything seems to have like this new card is coming out. Oh, but the other thing we already have is about the same or a bit better still. You know, like there's always a way to like I wouldn't say push down the power level of a card, but like there's always a way to show that like there's already something better in the game right now, like in the current state of the game anyway. Like I agree with you that it's very difficult to print a card that's just straight up, oh, there is nothing in the game existing that's better than this. It's very hard to just make that argument like these days. Agent Venom, I agree, was the last one that was quite close because it enabled so many things. I guess Searcher only worked in one deck, so probably not. That was definitely not like.
And like
Over the
Surtur
top,
got nerfed
right?
by like a total of 2 points and then dropped off the face of the earth, right? Where it's like that's not the same thing. Like get a card
Yeah, because the
that needs
deck
to
was
be
never
nerfed.
that insane anyway.
Yeah.
The deck was just borderline playable because Searcher was alive, you know, when it
Yeah.
was released. So
It's like the card is really like they can make Surturs, right? But like it's very rare for them to make a card where they have to be like this card can't exist in the form that it's in. Like Agent Venom, for example. Like they've made so many cards that I can look at and be like, that's busted. And it's just totally fine. Like Doom 2099, Galacta, Anti Venom. All of those cards are so messed up, but they're just totally fine because they all exist. It's bizarre.
I have another epiphany right now, which I think they've also tried their best to not make cards that make the game unplayable. Let me just name a few, like the OG Professor X, the OG
Yes.
Alioth, the OG Galactus himself. They've been trying their best to not make unplayable, like
Yes.
unfun game state cards. And I think that's also making it difficult to just straight up call any of these new cards to be just straight up busted because none of their intended they've tried their best not to make any cuts to just straight up make the game unplayable, which I guess is a good thing for sure.
They've definitely calmed down a lot in terms of like cards that say no. Like there's a lot
Yes.
less, like there's a lot more like 2 ships passing in the night type gameplay right now. There's still plenty of interaction and context involved, but there's a lot more like here's my stack and my interaction with you is making sure that like this, like playing a Magneto or whatever, right? Like that's my interaction with you, not like playing an Alioth and saying your cards don't happen, right? It does feel like they've gotten notably better at, I don't know the right way to say it, like they've gotten better at power creeping without making things broken, is sort of how I feel.
I think they just know that the player sentiment is I want to play the game. I don't want to play against something that makes me unable to play the game. So they make powerful cards that have interaction. I think that's just the whole gist of it, right?
Yeah.
Powerful cards that actually still are interactable with. And I think that's also the reason why we don't have like cards that are just straight up like, oh my god, this is too powerful.
Yeah. And on that note, it's time to end. I'm KM Best. He's Lamby Series, and he's going to take us out of here.
Thank you so much for being here, guys. Like, comment, and subscribe. And one more thing, thank you for 2024, and we will see you in 2025. Goodbye, guys.